Top 10 amazing people who survived the impossible. Hello YouTube, welcome to yet another exciting video, and today we're going to feature 10 amazing people who survived the impossible. People who found themselves struck by the worst luck imaginable, only to turn it completely around, immediately with the biggest breaks of their lives. If lucky was a person, these people would probably be the ones to claim that title. Here are the top 10 amazing people who survived the impossible. Number 10. Melvin Roberts. Lightning Man is the nickname given to Melvin Roberts, who survived a lightning strike not once, not twice, but 6 times within the same year, and over 11 times in his life. As we all know, lightning is one hell of a force of nature. Thankfully, every lightning strike is not a fatal strike. In terms of strict probability, the odds of getting struck by lightning 6 times is a 1 in 117 million billion, if that makes any sense. The true probability has to be factored downward some amount to account for living in an area with a lot of lightning strikes, but even still, it's a rare thing to be hit that many times. Roberts, who lives in Seneca, which is prone to lightning, was last struck on a sunny day while out on a lawnmower cutting his neighbor's grass. Luckily, he survived the strikes without any alarming side effects. Number 9. James Crawford. Motorist James Crawford's 2012 incident falls squarely into the funny only because nobody was seriously hurt category. His car turned into a convertible in an instant after a beam passed through the top. All this happened as he was en route to work on the New Jersey Turnpike early one morning. James encountered an interloper on the highway, a gigantic floating steel beam being lifted by a nearby construction crane, which the crane operator had somehow allowed to drift into traffic. Before James even knew what was happening, the beam ripped the entire top of the van off like a peel-back lid. In James's words, everything was sawed off, but I was still there. Although he did suffer a few cuts to his face and a broken thumb, James was almost unharmed. Stunned tow truck drivers who arrived on the scene to find James sitting nonchalantly on the guardrail can attest to that. One even said, "I can't believe he walked away." The entire passenger side and the roof were peeled off the van completely. It looks like a convertible. Nobody filed charges, and James was out of the hospital by lunchtime the same day and back at work the following week. Number 8. Michael Pierre. Bad things often happen in mysterious, inexplicable ways. Michael Pierre of Brooklyn experienced this firsthand when he pulled the handle of his toilet and the whole thing exploded in his face. The blast knocked him out and sent him to the hospital where he got 30 stitches. You're probably wondering, why did that poor man's toilet explode in his face? The water in the building had been turned off for maintenance, and Michael was curious to know if it had been turned back on. Never did he anticipate that his toilet would explode. In a split second, the water pressure blasted the toilet into tiny shards of porcelain shrapnel, which Michael was pelted with on the head, arms, and legs. Amazingly, Michael was one of a total of 4 toilets that went kaboom shortly after the water was turned back on in the building. He just appears to be the only one who was present for the event. The poor guy suffered PTSD, which caused him to stand a reasonable distance away from the toilet and used a rope to flush. He was so traumatized that he's unable to even look at his toilet. "I can't stop thinking about it every time I look at the bowl," he says. I feel sad for him that it caused this trauma, but he's super lucky to have survived. Number 7. Yasser Lopez. Laser beams and lightning spears are what you expect to see in action games. However, Yasser Lopez, 16 years at the time of the incident, almost lost his life after a freak encounter when his friend's gas-powered spear gun went off. The teenager, who was from South Florida, was out spearfishing in Miami before the fatal accident occurred. How everything happened is what puzzled doctors. The accident put Yasser in a very critical condition. The doctors even confirmed it as a striking injury, as it wasn't something they saw every day. I mean, what are the odds of a patient arriving awake and speaking with a 3-foot spear through their head? Doctors say the report noted that both boys woke up to find that Lopez had a spear in his forehead, suggesting that Lopez lost consciousness initially and that the friend may have passed out in shock. An X-ray image shows just how lucky the young boy was at the time, and on the bright side, the doctors used the X-ray image to plan out 3-hour operation to remove the spear. The spear completely missed the eye and any major blood vessels inside the brain when it went in, missing the central brain, which controls heart rate and breathing, by an inch. The spear caused little damage to the brain, and only lingering side effects may result in difficulty controlling the left side of his body. Luckily, he was right-handed. Talk about luck. Number 6. Matthew Breeley. Matthew Breeley was out riding his motorcycle with a friend near his Chesterfield home after the low-flying pigeon smashed through his helmet visor, leaving him unconscious but resulting in him opening the throttle and accelerating from 50 to 140 miles per hour. Unfortunately, his day was about to get a lot worse. The impact of the instantly dead bird knocked Matthew immediately unconscious, even shattering a lens of his glasses. After the impact, he remained on the bike and continued further for 200 yards before careening off an oak tree and ejecting Matthew onto the road. Matthew sustained multiple, rather serious injuries, including a fractured hand and a broken leg, which required insertion of a titanium pin to correct, and not one, but 2 skull fractures. He spent 10 weeks in Sheffield's Northern General Hospital. Nevertheless, he made a full recovery with the help of his wife, who was pregnant at the time of the accident. A year and a half afterwards, Matthew described himself as 99% back to normal. Was it just me, or do guys in general land in more strange situations? No single woman has made it to our list so far, so do you think we'll have some mentions on our top 5? Stick around to find out. Number 5. Unknown Italian man. More tragic motorcycle accidents and lucky escapes. In 2014, it was nothing but heartache for a 48-year-old Italian man who presented to the emergency department with dextrocardia after a motorcycle accident crushed his chest and spun his heart right round. Yeah, his heart rotated in his chest and ended up on the right side. To add insult to injury, both of his lungs were bruised, his left lung collapsed underneath multiple rib fractures, and he had a ruptured spleen. Doctors tried their best to ensure the heart sits back in place, and certainly once the air was drained from the heart, the muscle and its associated plumbing shifted obediently back into place. The patient's blood pressure, which had dropped dangerously low, returned to normal. Incredibly, the patient never lost consciousness after the accident. He may be the only man who can tell us what it feels like when your pacemaker decides to just up and relocate. The patient made a full recovery, and we hope his heart enjoyed its brief time on the other side of the sternum. Number 4. Truman Duncan. If the previous entry made you a little uncomfortable, it doesn't get any better from here. In 2006, a Texan by the name of Truman Duncan, who was a railroad switchman, was riding along on the front of a train car when he just slipped. Truman's horrific incident took place in June 2006, and Duncan faced damages to his right leg as well as his left leg, pelvis, and kidney. "I think I'm cutting too" is the last thing you would ever want to hear on the other line of a 911 call. Everything seemed to have happened so fast, and for some 20 seconds, Duncan hung onto the car, trying to escape being run over. But he fell underneath the car, got caught in the undercarriage, and was run over by steel wheels supporting 20,000 pounds of dead weight. Ouch. Remarkably, he remained conscious and had the strength to call 911 on his cell phone. On the 911 tape, he sounds out of breath but remarkably calm. "I need 911, care flight. I think I'm cutting too," Duncan says on the tape. "Someone got run over?" the operator asks. "It was me," Duncan responds. "I guess I'm going into shock. Hurry up, ma'am, because I'm about to pass out." One leg was still attached to his upper body by one lone muscle, but that was all. Almost more amazing than the fact that he didn't die instantly, he waited 45 minutes before paramedics arrived and extricated him from under the train. Despite massive blood loss, he stayed unconscious and even managed to call his family while he was waiting to be rescued. Luckily, Truman is alive and well with the help of extreme fortitude, the love of his family, and 23 surgeries in 4 months. Number 3. Taking the plunge. Early evening along the Chesapeake Bay can be a wonderful time of day, especially when the sun is just beginning to set. It's simply beautiful. As Morgan was driving across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, she was feeling the euphoria of having one of those spectacular moments in time. She was on her way to visit relatives, then suddenly calamity struck. She saw something in a rearview mirror while parked in traffic that would scare the life out of most of us. It was an 18-wheeler big rig, and it wasn't slowing down. There was no way to escape. Morgan's car was jerked like a roller coaster, and her greatest fear soon became a reality. It all happened in an instant, in a blink of an eye, but it felt like an eternity. Her windshield got shattered and her car began to sink faster as she panicked, but she was able to suddenly get it together. Despite her heavy hands and the water suffocating her, she was able to unbuckle her seatbelt, got out through the decimated driver's window, and for what must have been the longest 20 or 30 seconds of her life, swam to the surface. Morgan made it to some rocks surrounding one of the bridge's supporting abutments. She stayed there until she was rescued by police a short time later. She describes her experience as a miracle. And with that, it's now time for today's best pick. Today's photo was sent to us by a subscriber, so if you come across a photo online and want to know more details about it, just send it over to us. We might even feature it on a future video. Number 2, Half-Headed Man, Carlos Haffy Rodriguez. You've read the title, you see the picture, so let's just get this out of the way. No, it's not a Photoshop. A police report about the incident involving this man quite literally describes him with the exact words, half a head. But for some strange reason, his friends and acquaintances call him Haffy. The Haffy nickname was due to the formation of the man's head. His photo went viral in 2010 after his mugshot was posted online. The Miami man was arrested for attempted murder after setting his mattress on fire close to his neighbor's premises, though it's not clear yet why he did so. On to the interesting part. He lost so much of his brain in a car accident while on drugs at age 14 in which he hit a pole and was ejected through his windshield. And you can probably guess the rest. It's obvious that the other half of Happy's head ended up all over the road. What's not so obvious is how the hell he's still here to tell us about it.
I saved the best for last, but first, I have a quick challenge that takes only 5 seconds to complete. If you can leave a like and subscribe within the next 5 seconds, you'll get 10 years of amazing luck. Just try it, it really works.
Number 1. Fourth Man Murph. As always, we save best for last. Before we get to this man's story, we'd like to remind you we're not making this up. A 74-year-old Mississippi lumberjack had an especially gruesome accident in the summer of 1984. Fourth Man Murph was cutting down trees alone, as he'd done for decades, when a tree he had just felled pulled down a high-hanging branch and struck Fourthman, knocking him into a ditch. While this was happening, the falling tree knocked down another different tree, which proceeded to fall on Fourthman's legs, breaking it and pinning him where he was. And his bad luck was just warming up for the main feature. Fourthman was briefly knocked out when he came to realize that he had fallen on the chainsaw, which was still running and busy cutting completely through his neck. The jagged metal teeth had chewed through the front of his neck, through his esophagus, through all 4 jugular veins, and almost everything else connecting his head to the rest of his body. The blades didn't stop until they reached his spine. By then, his head was affixed to his shoulders by only his spinal column, some skin on the back of his neck, and a bit of tissue near his spine. After 6 surgeries and after fighting off several infections, Fourthman recovered almost fully from his ordeal. One of the surgeons who tended to Murph said, "You shouldn't be able to cut your head halfway off and drive out of the woods. You ought to bleed to death in 2 or 3 minutes. It could have happened to someone else out there and they could have died." Mr. Muff was able to enjoy 18 more years before passing away at 92. Hope you enjoyed our picks.